Marian Holloway had lived in Maple Falls for more than 40 years, long enough to memorize the rhythm of the rain against her windows and the soft creak of the old cedar planks beneath her feet. At 68, she moved through her days with a gentleness that came from habit and from loss. Her husband, Leon, had died 4 years earlier, yet his presence lingered in the house like a warm afterthought. The framed photographs on the mantel, the dent on his side of the sofa, the coffee mug she still couldn't bring herself to give away. Sometimes, when the evenings stretched too quietly, she still spoke to him. Just small things, telling him about the weather, about customers at the shop, about how much she missed the way he steadied her without even trying. The house felt too large for one person, but Marian loved it with a devotion that was almost physical. She loved the old apple tree in the backyard, the wallpaper she and Leon had hung back in the 90s, the uneven steps he kept promising to fix. This home held the shape of their life together, every memory tucked into its corners. Letting go of it was unthinkable. It was the last place in the world where she could still feel like Leon was close enough to answer. Most mornings, she rose before the sun, brewed a light pot of coffee, and sat by the kitchen window while the rain pressed against the glass. Then she walked to Holloway Fabrics and Crafts, the small store she had worked at for nearly 25 years. It wasn't glamorous, but it was warm, familiar, and filled with little bursts of color, rows of fabric bolts, buttons in small mason jars, finished quilts hanging along the walls. People came in not only to buy thread or patterns, but to talk about their children, about the town, about whatever small worry had been sitting on their shoulders. Marian listened with patience, offering a quiet smile or a gentle touch on the hand. Somehow, sharing her calm with others eased her own loneliness. She often thought about how differently her 2 daughters had grown up under the same roof. Caroline Pierce, her eldest at 42, had always been the steady one. She ran her own small hair studio, kept an immaculate house, and lived with a clear sense of responsibility that reminded Marian so much of Leon. When anything went wrong, a broken appliance, a scheduling mess, a forgotten appointment, Caroline handled it with the ease of someone who never let emotions cloud her judgment. Marian leaned on her more than she liked to admit. Jenna Holloway, 38, was everything her sister wasn't. Impulsive, dream-chasing, restless. Jenna jumped from one idea to the next the way some people flip channels. A new job, a new project, a new hope. But nothing lasted. Money slipped through her fingers. Bills piled up. And lately she'd been juggling late rent notices, car trouble, and the demands of raising a boy on her own. Still, Marian's heart softened whenever she thought of Theo, Jenna's 10-year-old son. Quiet, bright, and observant in a way that made him seem older than his age. Marian saw him twice a week, on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and those were the days she cherished most. Theo would sit at her table with a coloring book or a small science kit, humming softly while she cooked dinner. Sometimes he asked questions about Leon, and Marian answered them the best she could, grateful for the chance to talk about the man she missed. Those visits steadied her more than her daughters knew. They reminded her that she was still needed, still loved. That afternoon, as Marian was folding a set of embroidered table linens in the living room, she heard a car door slam, a sharp, hurried sound that didn't match the calm drizzle outside. She moved toward the front window just as the porch steps creaked. When she opened the door, Jenna stood there alone, soaked from the rain, hair stuck to her cheeks, breathing hard as if she'd run the whole way. And the look in her eyes, wide, frantic, almost pleading, told Marian that something was terribly wrong. Jenna stepped inside without waiting to be invited, water dripping from her jacket onto the hardwood floor. She wrapped her arms around herself as if she were freezing, though the house was warm. Marian closed the door behind her, gently guiding her toward the living room. "What happened?" Marian asked softly. Jenna lowered herself onto the edge of the sofa, elbows on her knees, hands covering her face. For a moment she didn't speak. Then the words spilled out in a trembling rush. "The plumbing in my apartment burst," she said, her voice raw. "A pipe in the wall. The whole place flooded. The landlord shut off the water and told me it'll take at least a week to fix, maybe more." Marian felt her chest tighten. "Where's Theo?" "Sleeping on a coworker's couch." Jenna's shoulders slumped. "I've been staying there, too. It's cramped. Her boyfriend works nights and hates having people over. Theo barely slept last night. I didn't either." She rubbed her eyes with shaky fingers, mascara smudging across her skin. "I found a better rental," Jenna continued. 2 bedrooms, decent neighborhood, no mold, no leaks. But," she swallowed hard, "they want first month's rent, last month's rent, and a security deposit, all up front." Marian didn't need to hear the numbers to know they would be steep. Rentals anywhere near Maple Falls were getting more expensive, and Jenna's paycheck from the electronics store barely covered day-to-day expenses. Marian sat down beside her daughter, waiting for the inevitable request. "I don't have it, Mom," Jenna whispered. "I'm short, way short." The words hung in the air like a weight Marian knew too well. Over the years, she had stepped in again and again, quietly, without judgment. When Jenna's car broke down in the middle of winter, Marian paid for the repairs. When the utilities were overdue and the power company sent warning notices, Marian covered them before the lights went out. When Jenna couldn't afford heating oil during a brutal cold snap, it was Marian who called the delivery company and put the bill on her own card. Each time, Jenna had promised it would be different, that this was just a rough patch, that she was close to getting back on her feet, and each time Marian wanted to believe her. But now, as she looked at her daughter's pale face and trembling hands, a quiet exhaustion crept through her. She wasn't sure how many more rough patches she could patch over herself. "Jenna," Marian said gently, "I don't have much. Between Social Security and the store, it barely covers everything. I have to be careful." "I know." Jenna looked up, desperation bright in her eyes. "But this place could really help us. Theo would have his own room. I swear I'm not asking for anything extra. Just help me get into the apartment. I can manage from there." Marian didn't fully believe that, and the doubt must have shown on her face because Jenna's voice broke. "Please, Mom, I don't know where else to go." It wasn't the plea that moved her. It was the thought of Theo sleeping on a stranger's couch, tired and frightened, with no space that felt like his. Marian pictured him curled up under a borrowed blanket, trying to be brave for his mother's sake. That image dissolved whatever hesitation she had left. "All right," Marian said softly. "I'll help." Relief flooded Jenna's expression so quickly it hurt to watch. Marian went to her bedroom, opened the small lockbox where she kept her savings, and counted out the amount Jenna needed. It wasn't comfortable to hand over that much. It emptied nearly everything she'd put aside for emergencies, but she pressed the envelope into Jenna's hands anyway. "I hope this helps you two start fresh," Marian said. Jenna hugged her hard, whispering thank yous into her shoulder, then hurried back out into the rain with the envelope tucked safely beneath her jacket. When the door finally closed and the house fell quiet again, Marian stood in the hallway, surrounded by the familiar creak of old floorboards and the scent of damp wool from Jenna's coat. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt something heavy settle inside her, a low, uneasy sense of foreboding she couldn't explain, like a storm gathering just over the ridge, waiting to break. Marian woke before dawn the next morning, long before her alarm, long before the first sweep of pale gray light touched the windows. The house was still, wrapped in the muffled quiet that always came after a night of steady rain. She lay there for a moment, listening to the old cedar rafters shift and settle, but her mind refused to rest. A tight, restless fear had been building in her chest ever since Jenna walked out into the storm with that envelope of money. She tried to push it aside, tried to tell herself she had done the right thing, but the fear kept returning, circling back to the same question, the one she had avoided for years. What happens to Jenna and Theo when I'm gone? It wasn't as if she expected to die tomorrow. She still walked to work every day on still tended her garden, still managed the stairs without complaint. But 68 wasn't young, and she and Leon had never had much saved beyond the house. An old place, modest but solid, built from decades of their shared labor. It was the one thing of value she could leave behind. And now, with Jenna drifting from one unstable situation to the next, and Theo always caught in the middle, that house felt like the only safety net Marian had to offer. She sat up, wrapped her worn cardigan around her shoulders, and reached for the small wooden box she kept by the bed. Inside were old papers, receipts, tax statements, voter information, and tucked neatly on top, a faded business card. Lawrence McMillan, attorney at law. He had handled the deed back when she and Leon bought the house. Back when they still dreamed of growing old together in it. She wasn't even sure he was still practicing, but she dialed the number anyway. He answered on the second ring, his voice slower, raspier, but recognizable. Within an hour, she was on her way to his office. McMillan's office sat above a hardware store on Main Street. The same narrow stairway, same flickering light bulb at the landing. Inside, the room smelled faintly of old carpet and paper files, the kind of place that hadn't changed much in 30 years. He greeted her warmly, motioning her into the chair across from his desk. "Marian Holloway," he said. "It's been a long time." "Too long," she replied, folding her hands in her lap. I need some advice." He listened quietly as she explained everything. Jenna's struggles, Theo's instability, the flooding, the couch surfing, the fear that this chaos might never end, and how, worst of all, she couldn't bear the thought of leaving them with nothing if something happened to her. When she finished, McMillan leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You're thinking about transferring the house," he said. Marian nodded. "But with a life estate," she clarified quickly. "I don't want to leave. I only want to make sure they have a roof over their heads someday." McMillan's expression tightened with concern. He opened a folder, pulled out a blank deed form, and set it on the desk. "I can prepare the transfer," he said, "but you need to understand what comes with it. Once you deed the house to Jenna, she becomes the legal owner." "I know," Marian whispered. "That means she can refinance it, rent it, borrow against it." He tapped the paper lightly. "Or attempt to sell it." Marian felt a small shiver run through her, though the room wasn't cold. "But the life estate would protect my right to stay," she said. "It should," he replied, "as long as no one challenges it, and as long as she doesn't put you in a situation where you have no other option but to leave." His voice softened. "It's a powerful gift, Marian, and a risky one." She lowered her gaze, thinking of Theo's tired eyes, the uncertainty in Jenna's voice, the endless pattern of emergencies that seemed to widen with each passing year. "I don't have anything else to give," she said quietly. "If something happens to me, they'll have nothing. This house, it's all I can leave." McMillan studied her for a long moment, then began filling out the paperwork. When he finally slid the deed across the desk, her hand trembled. She picked up the pen, breathed in deeply, and signed her name. It felt like signing a piece of herself away. Outside, the drizzle had turned colder, sharper, almost metallic against her skin. Marian stepped onto the sidewalk, pulling her coat tighter around her. The clouds hung low over Maple Falls, pressing the gray morning closer. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt something else, lighter in one sense, but afraid in another, as if the future had just shifted beneath her feet in a way she couldn't yet see. Jenna showed up later that evening just as the sky was fading into a muted blue, and the porch light flickered on against the damp air. This time she wasn't alone. Theo stood beside her, clutching a small backpack and looking tired but relieved to see his grandmother's familiar house. When Marian opened the door, Jenna didn't hesitate. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her mother with a force that startled them both. "Mom, thank you," Jenna whispered against her shoulder. "For the money, for everything. I don't know what I'd do without you." Theo joined them a moment later, hugging Marian around the waist. His small arms, the way he buried his face against her sweater, those gestures almost made her believe she had done the right thing, that maybe this time really was the beginning of something better. Marian held them both, feeling her throat tighten. For a brief, hopeful moment, she imagined stability returning to Jenna's life, imagined a quieter path ahead for Theo. Maybe this was the turning point they had all been waiting for. But hope has a peculiar way of dissolving when confronted with reality. Over the next few days, small things began to trouble Marian, little inconsistencies that didn't make sense on their own, but felt unsettling when added together. Jenna started asking questions, casual on the surface but oddly focused. "How old is the heating system again?" she asked one morning while running her hand along the radiator. In the afternoon, she lingered near the back door, peering up at the shingles. "Do you know when the roof was last replaced? I mean, approximately?" Later that night, she walked through the hallway, tapping gently on the walls. "Is the wiring original? I read something online about fire hazards." Marian answered each question as best she could, though confusion tugged at her. These weren't the kinds of things Jenna normally cared about or even noticed, but before Marian could ask why, Jenna's attention would drift elsewhere. She began coming home late, too. Sometimes near 10 o'clock, cheeks flushed, eyes bright, as if she were buzzing with some secret excitement. "I've just been working things out," she would say vaguely, "making plans." "What plans?" Marian asked once. Jenna smiled, evasive. "Just plans. You'll see." The way she said it made something cold settle in Marian's stomach. Then one afternoon, Marian returned from Holloway Fabrics and Crafts and stopped short at the sight of a sedan parked in front of her house. A well-dressed woman stood near the porch, holding a leather binder and staring up at the second-floor windows. "Can I help you?" Marian asked, gripping the strap of her tote bag. The woman turned with a polished smile. "Hi there. I'm Rachel Klein with Meadowview Realty. I'm just here to do a quick preliminary walk-around. Jenna asked me to take a look at the property." Marian felt the floor tilt beneath her. "She asked you to look at my house?" "Well, it's hers now," Rachel said lightly, as though discussing the weather. "We're just evaluating its condition and potential." Before Marian could respond, Jenna stepped onto the porch, waving casually. "Oh, Mom! This is nothing big. I just wanted to know the value. Nothing's decided. It's just information." "Information?" Marian repeated, the word catching in her throat. Jenna walked down the steps toward them, her voice turning breezy. "Mom, you worry too much. I just want to see what the place is worth. That's all." But Marian could feel it, the first ripple of something deeper, something darker. This wasn't curiosity. It wasn't idle research. There was intention here, direction, a momentum Jenna wasn't sharing. The real estate agent closed her binder with a brisk snap. "I'll be in touch, Jenna." As she drove away, the drizzle began again, thin and cold. Marian stood on the porch, staring at her daughter, the young woman she had carried, raised, supported, forgiven more times than she could count. And for the first time, she felt a small, sharp sting of betrayal. Marian returned home late the next afternoon, tired but comforted by the routine hum of the rain on her coat and the soft ache in her legs from standing all day at Holloway Fabrics and Crafts. She let herself in, shaking off the cold, and started toward the kitchen, only to stop at the sound of thudding footsteps upstairs, sharp, rhythmic. Not the sound of someone walking, but the sound of something being torn apart. Her heart lurched. She hurried up the staircase, each step amplifying the noise, scraping, ripping, the metallic rasp of tools against old plaster. When she reached the top landing, the hallway was filled with dust, floating like pale smoke in the air. Two men in work boots stood in her guest bedroom, tearing down the wallpaper she and Leon had hung themselves nearly 3 decades earlier. "Excuse me," she managed, voice trembling. What are you doing?" One of the men turned, barely glancing at her. "Ma'am, we were told to start prepping the rooms for updates. Need this done before the sale." "The sale?" Marian repeated, stunned. "There's no sale. I didn't authorize any of this." The man shrugged. "We were hired this morning, told to get the wallpaper off, check the drywall, maybe open up that wall between the rooms. We just follow the order." "By who?" Marian asked, though she already knew the answer. "Jenna Holloway," he said simply. "She said she's the owner." The wallpaper, her wallpaper, chosen with Leon on a warm spring afternoon, lay in shredded pieces across the floor, the flowers torn, the pastel colors faded and ruined. Marian felt a wave of dizziness, as if the room itself were collapsing around her. "I need you to stop," she said, choking on the words. "Please stop." "Sorry, ma'am," the man replied, returning to his work. "We've got a contract. You'll have to talk to your daughter." Hands shaking, Marian stepped into the hallway and pulled out her phone. She typed, "Jenna, what is happening? Why are there contractors tearing apart the house?" The reply came almost instantly. "Don't interfere. This is necessary. Necessary." The word landed like a blow. She tried calling, but Jenna didn't answer. She tried again, straight to voicemail. Marian leaned against the wall, feeling her chest tighten. She couldn't breathe, couldn't understand. She had handed her daughter the house to give her a future, not to erase Marian's own place in it. That night, the contractors finally left, leaving behind bare walls and debris that felt like open wounds. Marian stayed downstairs, too heartsick to clean, too overwhelmed to climb the stairs where the destruction waited. She sat on the sofa with the lights off, listening to the radiator hiss. Around 8 o'clock, headlights swept across the window. A car door slammed. Voices drifted in. A woman's laugh, Jenna's excited chatter. Then she heard footsteps in the hallway. She didn't move. Jenna entered the living room without knocking, flipping on the lights. A smartly dressed man followed behind her, holding a clipboard. "Mom," Jenna said brightly, as if nothing were wrong, "this is Thomas. He's very interested in buying the house." Marian didn't stand. She didn't speak. She stared at them as the room spun around her. Thomas smiled politely. "Beautiful place. Great bones. Once the renovations are done, it'll be perfect for a young family." Marian's throat closed. A tour began. Jenna leading the man upstairs, pointing out rooms Marian had painted with Leon, talking about modernizing, about potential rental income, about optimal resale. Marian sat in the dark corner of the living room, hands folded tightly in her lap, listening to their voices drift down, cheerful, transactional, as if her life were just another property transaction. When they returned downstairs, Jenna crossed her arms, her expression suddenly detached, businesslike. "The sale will be in 2 weeks," she said calmly. Marian's pulse hammered in her ears. "Jenna, you can't. I live here." "You'll move into a smaller apartment," Jenna continued, brushing aside the protest. "Something manageable. I'll handle everything." "Jenna," Marian whispered, voice cracking, "this is my home." "It's mine now," Jenna replied, her tone chillingly final, "and I'm doing what's best for all of us." Marian felt the truth settle like ice in her chest. Jenna didn't just want to sell the house, she meant to force her out of it. Marian didn't sleep. She waited in the living room long after the buyer left, the house still echoing with his footsteps and Jenna's cheerful commentary about modern open layouts and maximizing value. The wallpaper scraps upstairs, the torn-out trim, the dust, everything felt like a physical ache. By morning, she knew she couldn't stay silent anymore. She found Jenna in the kitchen pouring coffee, acting as if the night before had been an ordinary family visit rather than a brutal blow. "Jenna," Marian said, voice trembling but steady enough, "we need to talk." Jenna didn't look up. "If it's about the contractors, Mom, I already told you." "It's about the deed," Marian cut in, "and it's about my right to stay here. I have a life estate. I'm allowed to live in this house for the rest of my life. That was the agreement." Jenna finally raised her eyes. and the coolness there made something inside Marian wither. "I know what the agreement says," Jenna replied. "You don't have to keep reminding me." "Then why are you acting like you can sell the house?" Marian demanded, her voice cracking. "Why would you bring a buyer here? Why would you destroy the rooms?" "Because," Jenna said slowly, setting her cup down, "I talked to an attorney." Marian blinked. "An attorney? What attorney?" "A real one," Jenna said, as if that mattered, as if dismissing Macmillan with a single sentence. "And he told me exactly what I needed to know. You have a life estate, yes, but I don't have to keep you here. I only have to provide suitable housing." "Suitable?" Marian whispered. "This is my home. My life is here." "You'll get a place," Jenna replied with infuriating calm. "A nice apartment. Something easier for you, less maintenance. I'll cover the first month. You'll be fine." Marian stared at her daughter in disbelief. Jenna spoke as if discussing a simple errand, not uprooting her own mother from the only place she'd ever felt truly safe. Before Marian could respond, the sound of boots thudded up the staircase. The contractors had returned. Marian rushed toward the stairs, but Jenna caught her arm. "Don't interfere," she said sharply. "I asked them to knock down the wall between the bedrooms. Thomas wants an open studio layout. It'll increase the sale price." The hammering began almost immediately, blunt, violent strikes that reverberated through the entire house. "Please," Marian begged, voice breaking. "Stop this. Just wait. We need to talk before you tear anything else down." "We've already talked," Jenna said. "And I've made my decision." Marian's breath hitched as another section of wall collapsed upstairs. "This isn't your decision to make," she whispered. "I never agreed to this." Jenna stepped back, crossing her arms. "Mom, you signed the house over to me. I'm trying to make things better for all of us, but you're making it difficult. Just leave for a few days. Let us finish the renovations." "Leave?" Marian echoed, stunned. "It's loud, it's dusty, and you're in the way," Jenna said, as casually as if giving housekeeping instructions. "Go stay with Caroline or book a motel. I'll text you when it's safer to come back." The hammers struck again upstairs. Marian flinched with each blow. "Jenna, please," she whispered, desperate now. "This is my home." Jenna's eyes hardened. Not anymore. That night, the work dragged on until the sun was long gone. The contractors left first, but Jenna stayed, walking through the upstairs rooms with Thomas, the same buyer who had returned for another look. Marian stayed downstairs again, lights off, sitting motionless in her own living room as Jenna paraded a stranger through the hallways, where Leon used to hum while painting, where Theo used to fall asleep with picture books, where Marian's entire life still lived in the wallpaper and door frames. Her hands felt numb. Eventually, she heard Jenna's heels on the stairs. A shadow crossed the living room doorway. "Mom," Jenna said, almost cheerfully, "Thomas loves it. This is going to work out great." Marian didn't respond. Jenna took a slow breath, her tone turning sharp with finality. "Thanks for the house, Mom," she said. "But it's mine now." The words sliced clean through whatever hope Marian had left. When the door finally closed behind Jenna, the house was silent except for the faint drip of rain from the eaves. Marian stood, grabbed her handbag, just that, and walked out into the cold night. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay in a place where her presence was now treated as an inconvenience. Her feet, heavy and trembling, carried her through the wet streets of Maple Falls, past dark porches and quiet kitchens, until she reached a driveway lit by a soft porch lamp. Caroline's house. She stood there for a moment, soaked and shivering. Then she lifted her hand and knocked. Caroline opened the door almost instantly, as if she had been standing on the other side listening for something, some shift in the night that would tell her a storm was coming. When she saw her mother on the porch, soaked through, clutching her handbag with white knuckles, her face drained of color. "Mom!" Caroline whispered, stepping forward. "Oh my God, what happened?" Marian tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Tears came instead, quiet, trembling, uncontrollable. Caroline wrapped her arms around her and pulled her inside without another question. The warmth of the house hit Marian first, followed by the comforting hum of life inside, the faint murmur of the television, the smell of chamomile tea, the soft thud of footsteps upstairs. "Kids," Caroline called gently over her shoulder, still holding Marian's arm, "Grandma's staying with us tonight. Get the guest room ready." 2 pairs of footsteps hurried across the second floor, drawers opening, sheets rustling, the small sounds of children trying to help. Caroline led Marian to the couch, easing her down as if she were made of glass. She knelt in front of her, hands steady on her mother's trembling ones. "Mom, talk to me," she said softly. "What happened? Is it Jenna? Is it Theo?" At the mention of Jenna's name, Marian finally broke. It took time, halting breaths, long pauses, but she told her everything. The deed transfer, the life estate, the contractors tearing down her wallpaper, the real estate agent, the buyer, Jenna's declaration that the sale was happening in 2 weeks, and finally, the words that had gutted her completely. "Thanks for the house, Mom, but it's mine now." Caroline's face shifted as she listened, shock giving way to anger, anger tightening into something fierce and protective. "She did what?" Caroline's voice rose, sharp enough to cut. "She brought a buyer into your house. She hired contractors? Without your permission?" Marian nodded helplessly. Caroline stood abruptly, pacing across the room. "I knew she was impulsive, but this is cruel. This is unforgivable." She turned back to Marian, her voice softening, but still taut with fury. "You're staying here. I won't let her put you through this alone." Marian's shoulders sagged with relief and exhaustion. Upstairs, the grandchildren called down, "It's ready!" Caroline helped Marian up the steps, guiding her into the freshly made room. Soft blankets, clean sheets, a small lamp glowing warmly. Marian barely made it to the bed before her legs gave out. Caroline tucked her in like she had once done with her own children. "You're safe here," she whispered. "We'll figure this out tomorrow." Morning came early, washed in a gray light that matched the mood in the house. Caroline insisted on driving. Marian sat quietly beside her, hands folded in her lap, the landscape of Maple Falls passing by in blurred shapes. Attorney McMillan's office looked exactly as it had days earlier, but today it felt colder, harsher. He greeted them both with a solemn nod and motioned them into his cramped office. "Marian," he said gently, "Caroline told me you've run into trouble." Marian used what strength she had left to recount the events. McMillan listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly grave. When she finished, he exhaled heavily and folded his hands. "I'm afraid you're in a very difficult position," he said. "The deed transfer was valid, legally binding." Caroline's jaw clenched. "But she has a life estate. She can't just be kicked out." McMillan hesitated. That alone made Marian's stomach drop. "The life estate was written too vaguely," he explained. "It grants your mother the right to housing, not necessarily this house. Your daughter is within her rights to relocate her, as long as the alternative housing is considered suitable." Marian felt her breath leave her. "So, there's nothing we can do?" Caroline demanded. "Undoing the transfer would require proof of coercion or incapacity," McMillan said quietly. "And Marian, you signed willingly. You understood the document." Marian lowered her gaze, shame burning her throat. "I thought I was helping her," she whispered. "Helping Theo." McMillan's voice softened. "I know, but the law won't give you the protection you hoped for." The weight of her mistake settled over her, heavy and suffocating, an awful realization that she had handed her daughter the very weapon being used to push her out of her own home. Caroline reached for her hand. "We're not giving up," she said, voice steady. "But you need to understand the truth." Marian nodded, though her chest felt hollow. She had set this in motion, and now the consequences had come home to claim her. News travels fast in Maple Falls, faster than the river in spring, faster than the wind through the pines. By the end of the week, the story had already slipped into every corner of town, carried not by malice, but by that small-town current of whispered concern. At Holloway Fabrics and Crafts, customers lowered their voices as Marian stepped behind the counter, offering gentle pats on her hand and awkward assurances of, "You can stay with us anytime, dear." At the Rainy Day Cafe, the barista who'd known Jenna in high school shook her head with a sad sort of disbelief. By the next morning, Marian overheard two women near the grocery store freezer murmuring, "Did you hear? Jenna Holloway kicked her own mother out. After she gave her the house. Imagine." Even at Maple Falls Elementary, the staff exchanged looks when Jenna arrived late to drop off Theo. No one confronted her. This was still Maple Falls, where people preferred quiet judgment. But the shift was unmistakable. Jenna, who once walked through town with a bright, restless energy, now moved like someone walking into a wind she couldn't see. 2 days after Marian moved into Caroline's home, the doorbell rang in the late afternoon. Marian opened it to find Theo standing there with his backpack, lip trembling, his big brown eyes searching hers. "Grandma," his voice cracked. "Mom said you're not living at your house anymore." Marian knelt down, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "Sweetheart, things have been a little complicated lately. Your mom and I—" "Did she kick you out?" he whispered, the question trembling between hope and dread. Marian felt something inside her pull tight. She wanted to tell him no, that it wasn't like that adults sometimes made choices children couldn't understand. She wanted to shield him from the truth, to protect Jenna despite everything. But his eyes were too sharp, too knowing. "Your mom and I had a misunderstanding," she said softly. "She thinks something different will be better for everyone. But I'm okay. Really." Theo swallowed hard. "But you didn't want to leave." Marian hesitated. That was all the answer he needed. His shoulders slumped, and he stepped into her arms, holding on the way a frightened child clings during a storm. Caroline watched from the kitchen doorway, her expression torn between heartbreak and anger. The next day, shortly after noon, the school called. Theo had refused to go home with the office aide during early dismissal. "He keeps saying he wants his grandmother," the school secretary explained gently. "He's crying and won't go with anyone else." Caroline grabbed her keys. Marian followed. When they arrived at Maple Falls Elementary, Theo was sitting on a bench outside the office, backpack on his lap, knees pulled to his chest. He ran to Marian the moment he saw her clinging tightly. Then Jenna arrived. She hurried across the parking lot, hair messy, breath unsteady, eyes wild with frustration. "Theo, get over here," she snapped. Theo pressed himself against Marian's side, shaking his head furiously. "No," he said, voice small but growing stronger. "I don't want to go with you." Jenna stopped short, startled by the defiance. "Theo, stop this. You're embarrassing everyone." But there were parents nearby, teachers, even a few students lingering by the steps. And in that moment, the quiet hum of Maple Falls gossip seemed to surge around them. Every whisper, every sideways glance, all of it folding into the air. Theo lifted his chin, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I don't want to go with you," he cried, louder this time, his voice ringing across the lot. "You kicked Grandma out. You're being mean." A gasp rippled through the small crowd. Jenna's face blanched, her mouth opening and closing as if she couldn't find the right words. For the first time, her sharp confidence cracked, her shoulders sagged, and she looked suddenly small, overwhelmed, cornered, unraveling. "Theo," she whispered, reaching out but unable to bridge the space between them. "Please." But Theo stepped back, gripping Marian's hand tightly. In that moment, under the gray Washington sky with the town watching and judgment weighing heavily in the air, Jenna's facade finally broke. Marian almost didn't recognize the number when it lit up her phone the following afternoon. She hesitated before answering, but Jenna's voice was unmistakable. thin, shaky, almost childlike, "Mom, can we talk, please?" at the Rainy Day Cafe. There was no anger in her tone, no sharpness, only exhaustion. Marian agreed. The Rainy Day Cafe sat at the corner of Main Street, its windows fogged from the constant drizzle and the warmth inside. When Marian entered, she spotted Jenna tucked into a booth in the back. She looked nothing like the woman who had stormed through the house with contractors and buyers, full of restless confidence. Her eyes were red and swollen, mascara smudged into bruised shadows beneath them. Her hair was unkempt, thrown into a loose bun with strands falling around her face. She clutched a paper cup with both hands as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. When she saw Marian, her face crumpled. "Mom," she whispered, "I don't know what to do anymore." Marian slid into the booth across from her, steadying herself for whatever was coming. Jenna took a shaking breath. "Everything is falling apart." She stared down at her cup, speaking in a low, hollow voice. "Theo told me he wants to live with Ethan," she said. "He packed a bag yesterday and begged me to drop him off there. He said he doesn't feel safe with me. Do you know what that's like to hear from your own child?" Marian's chest tightened. "And work is a mess," Jenna continued. "My boss pulled me aside and said customers have been whispering about me. They said I threw my mother out and they don't want someone like that helping them with purchases." She rubbed her forehead. "He suggested an unpaid leave until things settle." She let out a humorless laugh. "Things aren't settling." Marian kept her gaze soft, patient. Jenna leaned back in the booth, eyes glassy. "I even went to the bank to ask about getting a mortgage to speed up the renovations. They wouldn't even take my application." "Why not?" Marian asked gently. "They said the house is a property controversy," Jenna said bitterly. "One agent flat out told me no one wants to touch a listing when the owner and the life tenant are fighting. He called it—" her voice cracked. "He called it toxic real estate." The words hung between them, heavy and humiliating. "And the worst part?" Jenna whispered, eyes filling again. "I destroyed everything. And for nothing. I didn't get the mortgage. I don't have a buyer. Theo doesn't want to come home. Everyone thinks I'm a monster. I ruined my life, Mom." Marian reached across the table, resting her hand over her daughter's trembling ones. "Jenna," she said softly, "the problem was never the idea of selling the house." Jenna looked up, startled. "It was how you did it," Marian continued. "The secrecy, the lies, the renovations without asking, bringing strangers into the house without telling me, treating me like I was in the way." Her voice trembled, but she held steady. "You didn't just sell a house. You broke trust. Mine, Theo's, even your own." Tears spilled over Jenna's cheeks. She didn't wipe them. "I don't know how to fix it," she whispered, voice shaking. "I don't even know where to start, Mom. I messed up so badly." Marian squeezed her hand gently. "The first step is honesty with yourself and with everyone you hurt." Jenna covered her face, sobbing quietly, not the explosive anger Marian had seen before, but the soft, collapsing sorrow of someone finally seeing the truth of her actions. When she finally looked up again, her voice was barely audible. Do you hate me?" "No," Marian said firmly, "but I won't disappear, and I won't stay silent anymore." Jenna swallowed, nodding slowly as if absorbing each word like medicine that burned going down. As they stepped out of the cafe into the cold Maple Falls drizzle, Marian felt something shift inside her. Not anger, not vengeance, but clarity. She had given Jenna the house, but she hadn't given up her life. Her home still held pieces of her that no contract could erase, and Marian knew what she had to do next. She needed to return to her house, to her place, to reclaim the life she should never have been pushed out of. 2 days passed before Marian felt steady enough to return to the house that had once been her sanctuary. The rain had softened into a light mist that morning, the kind that hovered above Maple Falls like a thin veil. Caroline offered to drive her, but Marian shook her head. She needed to walk. She needed to feel every step, needed the time to gather her courage. The closer she got, the more her heart fluttered, part fear, part longing. When her house finally came into view, she stopped on the sidewalk, taking in the familiar lines of the roof, the maple tree leaning toward the porch, the faint glow of warm light inside. It wasn't the same as before. It never would be, but it was still hers in all the ways that mattered. She climbed the steps slowly. Before she could knock, the door opened. Jenna stood there with red-rimmed eyes and a tentative, hopeful smile. "Mom," she said quietly. "Come in." Marian stepped inside and froze. The wallpaper upstairs, shredded days ago, was gone, but her room was clean, the dust swept away, and the boxes of her belongings had been unpacked. The bedspread Leon had loved was laid neatly across the mattress. Their old photographs, wedding day, family picnics, Christmas mornings, were rehung on the hallway walls. "I tried to put everything back the way it was," Jenna whispered behind her. I'm still working on the upstairs, but I wanted your room to feel like home again." It wasn't perfect. Nothing could erase the damage so quickly, but the effort was real. A small shape darted out from behind Jenna. "Grandma!" Theo ran forward, nearly knocking the air from Marian's lungs as he hugged her. He wore his backpack, stuffed full and bulging at the seams. "I brought my books, and my telescope, and some clothes. Mom said I could stay for a while so you don't feel alone." Marian cupped his face, kissed his forehead, and felt something inside her loosen, something that had been wound too tight for too long. Life did not snap back into place. There were no sweeping gestures of reconciliation, no magical return to normal. Instead, the house shifted into a quieter rhythm, one built on caution and slow repair. Mornings began with quiet breakfasts, Marian at the stove, Jenna making coffee, Theo sleepily thumbing through a comic at the table. They spoke softly, carefully, as if relearning one another. There were thoughtful conversations, too. Jenna would sit with Marian in the living room at night, asking instead of assuming. "Is it okay if I paint this room? Do you mind if I rearrange the shelves? Does this bother you?" It struck Marian each time how different it felt to be asked, not steamrolled, and Jenna, for the first time in her adult life, began therapy. "I need to understand why I do the things I do," she admitted one evening, twisting a tissue in her hands. "Why I blow up my own life, why I hurt the people who love me. I don't want to be this person anymore." Marian nodded, her heart quietly aching. She knew healing wouldn't be fast, but it was a beginning. She also knew that love, true motherhood, didn't wipe scars clean. It didn't erase hurt, but it could rebuild trust brick by brick, small gesture by small gesture, if both sides were willing. Slowly, they were. Spring arrived early that year, warming Maple Falls with soft breezes and the scent of new blossoms. One Saturday, the three of them went into the backyard to prune the old apple tree. Leon had planted it decades ago, and Marian could almost hear him teasing Jenna for never cutting branches straight. Theo held the small pruning saw with a seriousness that made Marian smile. Jenna steadied the ladder while Marian guided her from below. They worked quietly, peacefully, the way families sometimes do when words are too heavy and forgiveness is still in progress. When they finished, Theo sat beside Marian on the porch steps, dirt smudged on his cheek. "Grandma," he said, swinging his legs, "I think I want to live with Mom again. She's trying really hard, but I still want to come here every day. Is that okay?" Marian pulled him close, resting her cheek against his hair. "That's more than okay," she murmured. "You'll always have a place with me." He hugged her tightly, and Marian knew he meant it. The house was no longer hers legally. She no longer held the deed, no longer controlled the paint colors or the renovations or the paperwork. But as she looked around, the photographs, the faint smell of cinnamon from her kitchen, the sound of Jenna laughing softly with Theo in the yard, She understood something deeper. It had never just been the walls or the floors or the roof. It was the life lived inside them. And in that quiet spring light, Marian realized she hadn't won back the house. She had won back her family, and that mattered far more.